As it appears more and more likely that BYU could find itself on the outside looking in when it comes to the college football playoff without a Big 12 title in their back pocket. I'm not going to say I'm mad. I'm not going to say I'm sad. All I'm going to say is I'm disappointed.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. Proud to be part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is America's #1 sports podcast network. I'm Jake Hatch, host of Locked On Cougars and your resident BYU insider here, 14-year credentialed media member, and obviously the executive producer at the KSL Sports Zone in Salt Lake City, Utah. All right, coming up on today's show, we are going to talk about the latest iteration of the college football playoff rankings and why, quite frankly, I'm over it and I'm sick of it and I'm tired of it. We'll get into all of that coming up. Then we're going to catch up with a guy who has played an impressive role, undersold, and I think told role in BYU's offensive success this year. That is tied in Carson Ryan. I had a one-on-one chat with him after practice yesterday. You'll hear exclusively on today's podcast, and we'll finish up today's show on the basketball front as the Cougars get ready for their entrance into Feast Week, as we like to call it, as they will take on the Miami Hurricanes tomorrow afternoon. We'll get into all of that ahead on today's show, and it's all brought to you today by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers get up to $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Head to FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app today to get started. All right, so if you didn't see it last night, the college football playoff rankings came out, and BYU remained static at number 11 in the college football playoff poll. Now, you're thinking to yourself, maybe, hey, BYU's inside the top 12. They should be in the playoff. Nope, that's not the case because by virtue of the fact that we are allowing the top 5 conference champions to have automatic bids into the CFP, essentially the number 11 and 12 spots are reserved for the ACC champion and ultimately whoever the best G5 champion is. And that is where BYU finds itself on the outside looking in when it comes to the college football playoff. The issue I have is we are cherry-picking metrics of every variety to justify certain teams in different slots when it comes to the playoff committee. And I'm not going to lie, when we have Hunter Yurachek, who is now the interim, or I guess not the interim, but he's now the playoff committee chairperson, who is getting on ESPN, and Reese Davis lobs up a question about the 6-7 thing. And what does this buffoon do? He goes, 6-7. What are we doing here? That made a farce of literally everything this playoff committee is doing in my mind. Now, I am biased, obviously, because I believe that if BYU finishes this regular season 11-1, and even if they don't win their rematch against Texas Tech in theory in the Big 12 championship game, I am still a firm believer that you're going to cast an 11-1 runner-up in a Power 4 conference to the Wolves. And in ESPN's parlance, Heather Dinich and the like saying that BYU was, quote, a, quote, bid stealer, unquote. Get out of here with that. Get out of here with that nonsense and tell me just straight up that it is the ESPN and Big Ten Invitational. That's all you need to tell us right now. If 5 SEC teams are going to get in, 3 teams with 2 losses are already slotted in front of BYU in terms of getting at-large opportunities. And oh, by the way, their metrics in terms of strength of record, strength of schedule, all the different things out there, you can cherry pick whatever stat you want. BYU measures with the absolute best of them, and quite frankly, from my vantage point, outdoes the rest of them because they have 1 less loss. This screams to me that once again, the SEC and the Big Ten, as they are wont to do, are getting their way with the future of the playoff, and it comes at the expense of BYU and the Big 12 Conference. There's also an argument that the ACC is not getting the just reward of potentially having multiple teams in the playoff, but they've also cooked themselves in a way with all the different upsets of their top teams in recent weeks. So this year, it's more like the ACC. They're lucky to get 1 team in a circumstance. And our good friend Spencer McLaughlin already chronicled that Duke, 5-loss Duke, has a path to being not the Big 12, the ACC champion. Now, that would be absolutely incredible if that were to play out. But the bigger point is, I have got gumption with Brett Yormark as the Big 12 commissioner. Where the heck is he? At least, and our good friend Jeff Hansen, who's been a guest on this podcast, has an incredible job covering the Cougars over at Cougar Sports Insider, give him help, Brigham, and the like. He put out that he retweeted a thing from the ACC where the ACC is pumping up Miami's wins and what they've accomplished this season, even though Miami, they have to have an incredible amount of luck in their own right to even get to the ACC championship game. It sounds like it's just them being ranked 12th right behind BYU as a placeholder for whoever the eventual ACC champion is. But the point holds that, hey, at least the ACC, as he pointed out, is doing something to help out their conference. All we're getting is a graphic from the Big 12 saying, hey, we got 5 teams ranked in the top 25. Last week, we had Brett Yormark put out a statement saying that, hey, we always intend to win it on the field. Okay, Brett, where the HE toothpicks are you right now? Are you too worried about the players era that the Big 12 has bought in for this basketball tournament down in Las Vegas that has like 10 fans in the stands, seemingly, that you're too engrossed with basketball to pay attention to the fact that the football side of things, which, pays the vast majority of the bills for most of these athletic endeavors at most of these universities, is getting the shaft on a national level? His silence is deafening, especially when he's not defending, at least from my vantage point, public facing the Big 12. Nobody, apparently, at the conference office has any plans, at least at this juncture, to speak up in defense of BYU. Are they content to have just one team in the playoff field? Are they working behind the scenes and all of a sudden, magically, next week, BYU is going to move up? Well, history tells us so far that the playoff committee is very reticent to give BYU any credit for anything they've done. And in fact, the one loss BYU has, because it's thought to be an absolute just curb stomping at the hands of Texas Tech, has outdone, apparently, the 10 wins BYU has on the other side of the ledger. I don't like the fact that Brett Yormark has not spoken out on the Cincinnati deal. We talked about that yesterday, and trust me, that episode of the podcast very well might be the most popular single episode, that segment I did on the letter from the Hicken family about their experience at the Cincinnati game. Absolutely heartbreaking stuff. Might be the single most viewed and or listened to segment in the history of the 7+ years I've been doing this podcast. So thank you for that in its own circumstance. But we've heard nothing on a potential fine coming in terms of Cincinnati, even though precedent has been set by Colorado in terms of getting fined for that derogatory chant directed at the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and at Brigham Young University. And then, oh, by the way, the fact that you're going to have a one-bid league once again, despite having, and I'll defend Utah as well. Utah is going to be 10-2 if they take care of business against Kansas, and they're going to be ranked easily inside the top 15. You have 3 teams who have a shout, in my opinion, to be playoff quality teams, and only one of them is going to get in, and your apparent runner-up is being considered to be a, quote, bid stealer? What is going on here? Am I taking crazy pills? Because like I said, I am over this. If this is how this committee is going to operate, and they are going to absolutely kowtow to the to the SEC and to the Big Ten, then great. Just tell us it's the Big 2 era, and then we're SOL. That's what we need to be told straight up, so we can adjust our expectations accordingly. Don't tell us that you have the dream of making the playoff. Don't tell BYU, despite having back-to-back double-digit win seasons at the Power 4 level, that they are no good and they don't quantify or qualify to play for the big prize, speaking of a national title. BYU spent decades chasing where they're at today. And just like it was before this, apparently there is a glass ceiling that the Cougars, no matter how hard they try, cannot break through. It's disappointing, like I said. I'm not going to get too mad about it. I'm not going to get too sad about it, but I'm straight up disappointed. This is the reality of what this sport has become. It's a farce, if that's how we're going to operate this. All right, coming up next, we're going to talk about Senior Day with a guy who, I've said it on this podcast, has made tight ends great again at Brigham Young University. Carson Ryan. He's had 1 year at BYU, essentially 1 season to get it right, but he's made the most of it. And he explains exactly what his experience at BYU has been, what he hopes to accomplish still in the time remaining he has with the Cougars, and a whole lot more. And you'll hear it exclusively right here on Locked On Cougars next. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now, the NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with our friends over at FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of a game or want to ride the hot hand in the game, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks, and feels like to me everything literally in between those two. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. And even if basketball is not your thing, they got all the other options out there when it comes to your sports betting needs. It keeps every game more exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Head to FanDuel.com today to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, as they are, once again, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And thank you once again for making the Locked On Podcast Network America's #1 sports podcast network. Appreciate all of you and your kind comments yesterday. Appreciate your guys' support. And it really does mean the world to me that we've got a community here of Cougar fans who are very caring, honestly. And I appreciate the messages you guys sent about the segment we did yesterday about the Hicken family, and sincerely hope that all the different moves. I know that Drake Tolliver, Locked On Big 12, has got some gestures he's working to help them out as well. It's all appreciated. So thank you. Thank you for your support. All right. So senior day is coming up for the BYU football program on Saturday morning, technically at 11 a.m. when they kick off things against UCF. Well, there's a decent senior class that's going to be walking at BYU and celebrating their final game at Lavelle Edwards Stadium. And Carson Ryan is among those guys. Now, he is a well-traveled college football player. He's one of those guys that, oh no, he's a two-time transfer. How is that ever going to work out? Well, here's the thing. Carson, to his credit, has probably enjoyed, I think, his most success to date on the field in his lone season as a BYU Cougar by any quantifiable metric you want to use. He has been a super valuable asset to the BYU football program. And I, for one, I wish we got 3 or 4 more years of this young man. He is absolutely incredible to talk with. And I want you guys to hear him talk about senior day, matching up with UCF, coming off the win over Cincinnati, and quite frankly, what he hopes to accomplish both in the time remaining with BYU, because we know they'll play in the postseason. That's absolutely a given at this point, but also what he hopes to accomplish as he continues his football playing career on into the professional ranks. So without further ado, here's an exclusive chat with Carson Ryan, reminiscing on a circuitous, as we talked about, route in his collegiate career. Here's Carson Ryan.
How crazy to think about you're coming up on your final regular season game as a college football player?
I mean, it's a weird feeling, you know, like feels like yesterday I just got on campus at UCLA as a freshman, and I'm like thinking to get all the time in the world. Like there's 4 or 5 years of this. Like it's I don't have to worry about being a senior for a while. And all of a sudden you blink and it's here, and it's like my senior year. I'm like, it's bittersweet. Like it's been a great journey, and I have so much fun, so many friends and coaches met along the way, and I've loved every second of it. But there's a little bit of sadness too, because it's like, oh man, it's nothing like college football.
Yeah. You know that you'll be playing at least one postseason game, regardless of whatever happens. But
sure.
What's the mentality as you approach kind of the end of your college career overall?
I mean, right now, let's just win this next game. You know, we're not trying to look ahead, get ahead of ourselves, and be like, oh, we got it locked in, because we don't. We got to handle business this weekend. We got to win this game and go out and dominate again. So right now, me personally just focus on UCF and getting the job done.
Has that been the messaging from the coaching staff? Like, the job's not done.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like Coach Lyons really emphasized, like, I don't want anyone talking about Texas Tech, booking flights to the championship game. Like right now, we got to beat UCF, or none of that matters. So,
what do you make most of UCF on film? What have you seen from them?
They got some good players. They got 2 really good DNs. What I've really noticed, I think they got a really solid defense. I think, regardless of their record, like they've played good defense all year. They got some athletes out there, some good explosive long guys at DN. So we're going to come out ready to play, especially tight end. Like a lot of their good players, we're going to get that matchup. So we got to come ready to play and get our technique right.
I've asked you multiple times in your time here about your penchant for blocking and how you relish that role. Where does that come from?
I just kind of developed when I was a young kid in high school and stuff. Like I've always wanted to be I always liked the physical part of football, and you know, blocking a guy is nothing more physical than that. Just slamming each other at full speed, you know, just grabbing them, manhandling them, just imposing your will on the defender. Like, there's nothing more physical than that, especially in football. So I just love it, and it's such a great feeling. Like, you just locked up a defensive end, the running back ran right off your butt and just went for a 15-yard run. And so I take just as much pride in that as catching a 20-yard pass like this. And I think it's important for you to have that as a tight end. Like, people overlook it oftentimes. A tight end just worry about catching the ball, getting 600 yards, 50 catches, But no, your job as a tight end is to block and make plays for other people so they can get on space. So, yeah.
Is it gratifying to see a guy like LJ go for the 222 he went when you're doing that?
Oh yeah, no, that was such a good feeling. We went in that second half, we ran the ball almost every time, and a lot of times you want to be sad, oh, I'm not getting the ball, but man, LJ, we got him 1,000 yards that game, and he got it too. He was breaking tackles left and right.
Sure.
But it's just such a cool feeling to get that for him, and I'm super happy for him, and he's a baller, and I'm just excited for him, and he's gonna have a great rest of the season too, these last few games, and so we're gonna get him even more over 1,000, getting 1,500 yards hopefully is the plan, but just keep him going, keep feeding him the rock, and just keep letting him make plays.
What's been your favorite part about playing in this offense?
I like the versatility that we have as an offense. We do a lot of different things, especially at tight end. They've had me line up at wide receiver in the backfield and in the wing on the line, really showcasing all of my talents as a tight end, and let me do it block out in space in the perimeter, go out on those jet sweeps and block inline in the 3-point stance, go out and run routes, catch the ball. So just doing a lot of different stuff is what I love, and it's being able to do that here and give me the opportunity to do that. It makes it more fun.
A lot of people have asked about Bear Bachmeier's demeanor because he's pretty docile off the field when we talk to him in the media. How is he different on the field, if at all?
I mean, he's still pretty calm when he's on the field, but he gets pretty juiced up still. He's a competitive guy and he wants to win. When he makes a play, he gets fired up, or when he feels like he wants something back, he'll get pissed about it. So it's I love that about him. He's a competitive guy and he hates to lose. So
where does he stack up in the quarterbacks you've played with?
He's one of the best I played with. I played with a lot of different QBs. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, Dante Moore, guys in the NFL, guys who are having a great season this year. Dante, and he's really good, especially for a freshman quarterback. The amount of poise he's shown and talent he's shown as a freshman, and what he's been able to do here is it's just super cool to see. And I think he's gonna be a great player going forward.
I want to circle back to something you said earlier. So about the fact that they've allowed you to kind of showcase all your talents as a tight end. Do you feel like that is in some ways helpful as you look towards your professional future and the like?
Yeah, no, it definitely is for sure. Being able to do a lot of different stuff with tight ends really adds a lot of value to you, your position, and being able to just be a football player, block in space, and be able to do a lot of different stuff adds versatility to the offense too. Because you don't have to rotate guys out for the run players or pass plays. You can just stay in with one guy the whole time. It allows us to do a lot of different stuff. And so being able to show that I can do that and block and then leak out in space, get the ball. So I think it's really good.
Is there a particular tight end that you have patterned your game after?
I mean, I watch a lot of different tight ends. Guys like George Kittle is one I really like to look at because we have pretty similar frame, height, and weight, and so I like the way he plays the game. I really like he's a big blocker, focuses on that. I like watching Kyle Juszczyk too. I'm big 49ers, the way they run their offense and use their tight ends and their fullbacks and how they get them in space. And I really like to model my game after them.
Well, as a 49ers fan, I can absolutely appreciate what you just said about that. Final thing for me is there's people out there saying that you've restored the tradition of the great tight end at BYU. Is that gratifying for you?
Yeah, it's a cool thing to say, cool thing to hear, and I just hope to keep doing that this year. Just keep producing a tight end that's catching the ball or run blocking. It's a cool thing to hear, and it's it's something I wanted to do. Just be a dominant tight end this year for this team.
A big thank you to Carson Ryan, and as always, a big thank you to BYU Athletic Communications for arranging that interview. Always appreciate the time I get to catch up with these BYU athletes and share their stories. That's one of my favorite things about doing what I do in this industry is talking with these athletes and letting Cougar fans get to know them just a little bit better than they might otherwise ever hear about that. And a guy who spent time at UCLA and the University of Utah, and Carson, you talked about it. He relishes blocking just as much as he enjoys catching 20-yard passes. And he loves celebrating touchdowns. Trust me, there's zero doubt about that. But this is a young man that I'm telling you, his blocking ability, he talked about George Kittle. George Kittle might be the single best inline blocker at tight end in the NFL today. And if Carson gets anywhere near that level, guess what? Carson is going to have a very fruitful NFL career beyond college. But let's hope the ride's not over at BYU for Carson and the Cougars. He is absolutely a guy that I would love to have at BYU for 3 or 4 more years. And many of you know that I've covered recruiting for well over a decade in my professional endeavors in sports media. Carson was one of those guys that I always felt like, in a way, got away from BYU. He always seemed like a natural fit for BYU, especially considering their history as one of the tight end universities across college football. And it's great to see him finally in a Cougar uniform. And I mentioned it to him. Appreciate his being kind of the Renaissance man in a way, bringing BYU tight ends back to the forefront and showing how much of a weapon and how much of an asset they can be in the BYU football program. And whoever steps up next in that role, whether it's a Kean Need or a Noah Moyaki on down the list of the tight ends on BYU's roster, they have some pretty sizable shoes to fill when Carson Ryan exits BYU to go to the NFL. All right. So as always, thank you again to Carson. And I know he's got an incredible family supporting him as well. It's really cool to see him doing what he's doing for BYU football. Coming up next, though, we're going to flip it over to BYU basketball. The Cougars, we call it Feast Week because there's games literally all over your television and all these different MTEs, mid-season tournament events happening literally internationally. In the case of BYU, down in Kissimmee, Florida, as they will participate in the Terry's Chocolate Invitational. Now, that's just a sponsor name, but it's an opportunity once again for Kevin Young's squad to show out on a national stage, and they'll tip it off with the Miami Hurricanes. And we'll break down that matchup coming up next, right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Omaha Steaks. Now, the holidays can always feel a little bit easier when you know you already have the perfect gift, and Omaha Steaks makes it almost too simple. Whether you're treating yourself this season or sending someone something memorable to family and friends, Omaha Steaks delivers handcrafted perfection right to their door. I can speak to this personally. My mother-in-law, she has done this for me for many, many years. Omaha Steaks is absolutely incredible, and this is the best time to jump in because this week their cyber sale is here, and the deals are absolutely huge. Like I said, I've been on the receiving end of this, and I plan on sending these out myself. The quality is exactly what you hope for. Incredibly tender steaks, rich flavor, and meals that make hosting or weeknight cooking even easier than you would have thought otherwise. The variety is underrated. Steak, burgers, comfort meals, sides, desserts. It's one of those things that truly fits no matter who you're gifting it to, their palate. Save big on unforgettable gifts with Omaha Steaks this week. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide and an extra 20% off select favorites during their cyber sale this week. And for an additional $35 off, use the promo code COLLEGE at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code COLLEGE. Terms apply, and see their site for more details. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you're not signed up for the Locked On Cougars Insider Group, another plug for you guys to get on it today. Get you the inside scoop on all things BYU that I am hearing. And the best part about it is it's $5 a month to be a part of the group. And I guess the kicker beyond that is you get a 14-day free trial before you're charged a single penny. See if it's worth your time and your money. And I think it very much will be that if you give it an opportunity. So check it out. Link is in the show notes below, or reach out to us and we'll get you squared away as members of the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. BYU basketball is headed to Florida in Orlando to take on the Miami Hurricanes, and then the winner of, or I guess in case whoever, they'll place either Dayton or Georgetown in the second game of their two-game set here in this Terry's Chocolate Invitational down there in Kissimmee, Florida. Now, looking at this game on its head, speaking of the Miami game for BYU, it's another name opponent for BYU basketball to face. And Miami is they're not that far removed from being one of the elite college basketball teams. Remember, Jim Larrañaga had them absolutely rolling for a pretty decent spell there. And things fell off a little bit as Jim Larrañaga fell off in his own right and ultimately stepped down. And I think he retired, if I recall correctly. But Miami's off to a pretty prolific start this season. You look at their record. They're 5-1 on the year, and they have scored points in bunches, but they have scored those points against exactly nobody. And that's nothing against Jacksonville, Bethune-Cookman, Stetson, Elon, and Delaware State. That's nothing against them. They're money games. They're buy games. And there's a reason why a program like Miami has played all those teams at home. The only team that they have played of note so far this season is right in the same realm as BYU, and that is number 10 ranked Florida. Yes, the defending national champions. The Hurricanes and the Gators squared off, and the Gators won that game pretty decidedly, 82-68. And I think that is where I lie on this, is BYU gets ready to play this game tomorrow afternoon on Thanksgiving afternoon, is that BYU should be able to handle this game, especially considering the performance BYU just put on against Wisconsin in the Delta Center this past weekend. Wisconsin is kind of one of the forgotten teams amidst all of the premier programs that BYU was going to play this season. For some reason, Wisconsin kind of got lost in the shuffle, but they were the 23rd ranked team in the country. And we all remember the absolutely epic March Madness game that they played against one another just 7 months ago and change. BYU absolutely throttled the Wisconsin Badgers. So pardon me if I'm not necessarily all that scared of Miami, but you can never be too sure of how BYU will handle this because they're back out on the road, albeit neutral site. But once again, Orlando, Florida is far closer to Miami than it is to Provo, Utah. So I would expect there will be a decent amount of Miami fans who may make the trek upstate to watch this game. But if you're looking at it in terms of what BYU needs to be aware of, they've got to keep an eye out for Malik Renault. He is leading them in terms of scoring at 21.5 points per game already this year in just 25 minutes average per game. That's pretty prolific in terms of scoring versus minutes played. And like I said, a lot of these games have been blowouts, so his minutes have been lowered, but he's putting on a prolific display. He's also averaging 7.5 rebounds. This is a guy that I'm interested to see how BYU will defend him. Is he going to be Keba Keita, or are they going to put a guy like a Mihailo Boskovic out there to try and limit him, or maybe even Hadim Boop? Maybe Hadim moves into the starting lineup because we still don't have any clarification on the suspension length for Moo Davis. Speaking of Kennard Davis Jr., it's essentially been told it's indefinite. And we'll see what happens with that. I don't expect really any clarification to come until he ultimately is cleared to play. And then all of a sudden be like, hey, he's cleared to play. That's just the way BYU operates. I'm not criticizing it. I'm just stating a fact for a fact of how BYU has operated in the past with similar type circumstances. But it brings an interesting dynamic into play here to how they will defend a guy like Renault. And that doesn't preclude them also from having three other guys who can score in bunches. Trey Donaldson, True Washington, Trey and True. Great. And by the way, it's TRE and TRU. So both guards averaging, in the case of Donaldson, 16.8 points per game. Washington's averaging 14.8 points. And then Shelton Henderson also averaging 11.8 points per game. So this is a fairly balanced Miami offense that is capable of having multiple players step up and play ball, and really, I think, could make for an interesting matchup for BYU in this game. I'm interested to see, once again, how the Cougars will go about defending them, but I also think that the Cougars should take confidence coming out of their game against Miami and the other performances they've put on, like they did against UConn, especially in that second half, that they can hang with literally anybody. This is a BYU team. We need to acknowledge that BYU has got really elite talent. And I appreciate that fact that BYU's out there competing with the absolute best of the best. And they've got one of the top prospects in this past recruiting cycle in AJ DeBonson. And AJ looks like he's very well on his way to potentially being the number one overall pick. Well, games like this are going to be nationally televised on ESPN. Having a guy like Fran Fraschilla, who's sung his praises and sung BYU's praises for years, it's an opportunity for BYU to go out and make another statement. Kevin Young talks about all the time about stacking days. And you know what that means is it means continuing to be the steady Eddie self that BYU hopes to be every single game. You don't get too up for any opponent. You don't get too low for any opponent. You don't play up or down to the relative talent level of your opponent, but you also do not disrespect them and overlook them. BYU can ill afford to overlook the Miami Hurricanes thinking, okay, it's Miami. No, this is a Power 5 program in the basketball parlance. There's a Power 5 in basketball. There's a Power 4 in football. Used to be Power 5 and Power 6, but with the Pac-12 going the way of the earth and being rebooted, it's now the Power 5 in basketball. So you cannot overlook this ACC squad in Miami. But at the same time, looking at it for what it is, I think BYU is in a very, very comfortable territory taking on the Miami Hurricanes. Yeah, every game seems to have its own identity. Could foul trouble play a role in this? It always does, it feels like, because college basketball officials are absolutely, let's say, an eclectic bunch. Is that kind enough to say? I don't know who the officials are going to be in this tournament, but I am curious once again just to see how BYU follows up an absolutely prolific performance against Wisconsin and how they parlay that into this. You follow that up with a game against Dayton or Georgetown on Friday, and you're going to come home, coming back to Provo, with two pretty decent wins in your back pocket. And Kevin Young has been very clear that this non-conference slate for BYU, it was beefed up with a purpose. It was beefed up because he did not like the fact that BYU essentially came out of non-conference last year not really knowing who they were as a program. they're going to know exactly who they are once they enter Big 12 play at the end of this month, because they have tested themselves against some of the best and brightest in the country. And I like I said, I don't necessarily consider Miami to be a top tier of the non-conference games BYU's playing, but it's also not a game that you're playing against little sisters of the poor either. It's going to be a test. And like I said, the lineup matchup in this game is going to be very interesting to me, because Shelton Henderson's a 6'6", 240-pound bowling ball. He's their fourth leading scorer. I already mentioned looking at Malik Renault, 6'9", 238. They've got some dudes, and they're upperclassmen. They're going to absolutely test BYU's ability in terms of defending kind of a new look roster. We saw against Wisconsin, because Wisconsin's got legit just height, and BYU looked like the far more athletic squad. How do they look against this team? That's one of the questions that's going to be answered here. And it's a veteran-laden squad. There are some freshmen as well in this Miami lineup, but it's kind of that mix that BYU also has with Richie Saunders and a guy like Rob Wright. BYU's big three, as they often do, will probably have to carry the load here for BYU, but also the other lesson we learned out of Wisconsin was that with A.J. DeBonsa glued to the bench for a significant period of that second half, all BYU did in that game was say, okay, yeah, you think you're within 7, you're going to make a run here. No. In fact, we're going to turn the tables on you. We're going to make the run, make it even bigger of a lead, and then AJ is going to come in here and be the closer. That's what I love about this BYU basketball team. They got premier talent, and they're not afraid to deploy it, use it, and absolutely show what they're capable of. And I look forward to seeing how they do here in Orlando coming up, or Kissimmee technically. I think it's the ESPN Wide World of Sports complex is where this is being contested. So looking forward to that. We will have, I'll at least do a short recapping the game, whatever happens. Check that out on Thanksgiving afternoon / evening after you've stuffed yourself full of food. And I'll just say this before we get to the holiday. Coming up later today, I'm going to put it out early. It's going to be our crossover edition with Locked On UCF host Mike Gittins. Get you ready for that one. We'll probably put that out this evening so you can have it for your drive to your family, whatever you're doing, maybe tonight, or check it out tomorrow. And then, of course, we'll have another edition on Friday, a full game preview of what I expect for BYU and UCF, and essentially the stakes on this game. So we're not going to leave you high and dry this holiday weekend. I know a number of you will be traveling and may not be able to check it all out, but as always, truthfully, thank you all for all the support. It really does mean the world to me that you guys find this content of value. So as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Now go make your second listen today. Locked On Big 12. Drake is doing a great job with the Locked On Big 12 podcast. It's available wherever you get your podcasts, just like this one, also available on YouTube. And until tomorrow, everybody, I guess later on this evening, potentially, thank you for being an everydayer right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.